Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show. With me on the line is an incredible talent, an incredible thought leader, so super grateful to have her here. Her name is Caroline Goyder, rather. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Delighted to be here.
Well, the privilege is really all mine. We're going to get into a whole bunch of things, your books, and a whole bunch of amazing work that you're doing in the community of business and thought leadership, not only in the UK but around the world. But for our viewers around the world who haven't potentially read any of your books or don't know anything about who Caroline is, why don't you give us the elevator pitch? Who are you? What are you about? What matters to you? Kick us off.
I help leaders take adrenaline and turn it into authority and presence and gravitas, which is a word we'll probably get to. And it's a lot about the journey that I've had because I was the drama student who was told she had no presence, you've got no energy, you have no gravitas. They didn't say that, but they would have done if they could. You've got no resonance in your voice. And I have had to, over the last couple of decades, unpick what we do when someone says you need more presence, you need more charisma, you need more gravitas. Because the belief that limits people is that I can't change. And I know, because I see it happen in 5 minutes with clients, that we can change so quickly when we want more gravitas, more charisma, more presence. And my job is about helping people find the fast ways in that they can practice every day. A bit like advanced driving lessons. It's blindingly obvious when you get it, but you've got to practice.
hmm So when you say gravitas, like let's land that for everybody. What do you mean? What does gravitas What does gravitas look like in the world of a business leader?
So a business leader with gravitas is someone, I think the simplest metaphor and the one that most people get is it's the voice on a flight. When you hit turbulence, it's the pilot's voice that says, we're going through a pocket of turbulence. We'll be out in 10 minutes. Just put your seatbelts on and we'll be through quickly. And you go, ah, phew, this person's got this. I'm safe in their hands. That's what personally gravitas means to me. When I wrote the book, I did a lot of research on it. And one thing I went to is Aristotle, and I modernized Aristotle, which is probably quite a cheeky thing to do. But he talks about ethos, logos, and pathos. And I turned that into knowledge, what you know about the world, what you know about yourself, plus passion, your emotion, your energy, what spikes you, what makes you alive in the world. Knowledge plus passion plus purpose, your big drivers, your motivators, your common purpose, because charisma is often about ourselves, gravitas is often about a wider common purpose, and then minus anxiety. So knowledge plus passion plus purpose minus anxiety. And if you think about any great leader that you admire in tech, in politics, beyond in business, they often have those four qualities. They have
hmm
knowledge, they have passion, they have purpose, and they manage their anxiety.
Interesting, the anxiety piece. It's like I'm sorry. It's like I got the passion, the purpose, the knowledge, and it's like anxiety. It's like what? It's like a little bit off
Yeah, yeah,
center
yeah.
for me, right? So let's double click on that. Like, where did that come from? Like, I get, a lot of people, even I, like have a moment in my life, like in my executional day, if you like, where I'm like, oh shit, like I'm feeling pretty anxious. And a lot of people take pills for this sort of thing. Like I get it, but from a context of leadership, like where does this role of managing anxiety, come into play, and why does it matter so much?
So again, I went back to the ancient world. I'm actually just going to pause, Matt. I'm going to reset my camera because it's doing something
Yeah,
funny.
you've gone all. You've gone. There you
There,
go. There you go. Bright and shiny. Here we go. So off you
sorry.
go.
All
That's
good.
fine. All good.
I go back to the ancient world on this. There's a lovely Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, and he said, "How can you lead others if you can't first lead yourself?" Now, we can all think of leaders in various countries who lose their control. They become dysregulated. They start letting emotion overrun them. Now, sometimes that is powerful. But to Marcus Aurelius's point, if you are leading people, you're leading their nervous systems. It's like the pilot of the plane when you hit turbulence, panicking, sounding fast, stressed, worried. Or a friend of mine got on a flight recently which suddenly hit something as they came down. They don't know what they hit, and then suddenly went straight up back in the air again. And she said she kind of felt the G-force, and the pilot didn't say anything, and that made it worse. So it's understanding as a leader that your voice, your energy is changing the nervous systems of the people that you lead. And that's where minus anxiety is actually really, really important to think about. You've got to be able to handle it, because otherwise you're dysregulating your audience.
Mm. One of the things I was watching was your TED talk on the role of the voice tonality and things like that. And it struck me as being a key thing for us to talk about today, because if I think about Winston Churchill, for instance, or it was one of the American presidents, freaking named escapes me now, but he did a series of radio addresses during the Second World War.
Oh, FDR, yeah,
FDR, and
Roosevelt, yeah.
my son's initials are like FD, like because of that guy, and I can't believe, like, I should have just gone with my son's name anyway. But yeah, man, he did like a series of radio addresses, and to galvanize people, to motivate people, to lead people with an idea that, hey, we're going to win this thing, and as hard as it's going to be, like, we're going to overcome. And this amazing like Netflix series I've watched about the UK Prime Minister like doing these similar sorts of things, or even that one where it was like the king with the stutter in England.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It was a similar thing. It was like, and geez, like he had a stutter and he somehow managed to like overcome that, right, through coaching and so forth. I'll bring up the series for everyone in a moment. But my question, though, is like voice tonality. Like, what's the role of that in communication and leadership?
It's massive, is the answer to that. It's the kind of secret source of great leadership. And the problem for most of us is that we are unconscious of our voices because it's out breath. And we breathe so many times a day that thinking about breathing would just be really complicated. It's like thinking about our heartbeat. But sometimes in order to harness something, you've got to make it conscious, which is why it's a bit like driving lessons. Sometimes you have to be consciously really incompetent first, get to understand the clutch and get to understand the brakes and the gears if you're in an automatic, and go through that process so that you can control the vehicle. Voice is the same. If you understand that voice is out breath and that every pause is an in breath, and that when you think about the emotion you want an audience to feel as you breathe in, your voice will then change. We start to realize that we can harness and control our voice as a tool to move other people through emotion, like a movie director does. But that makes it sound a bit too conscious. I was working with a group today who are involved in tech in London, in the UK, and they're all about to lead their teams, this big business, through a big transformation, and it's about to IPO as well, so the pressure's on. And we were talking a lot about, they were thinking about what they're saying. They've got the comms for this message really clear. They know why they're doing it, but what they're not doing is two things. One, they're not putting themselves in the audience's shoes. And that means that they're not being emotionally empathetic to what they need to lead their audiences through. So if you're about to lead an audience through transformation, first, maybe get them curious. Then maybe present the pain point, make them feel worried about the environment that we're going into. Then make them feel excited about the vision. And then perhaps make them curious or excited about how they action this. So it's not just, it's obvious in some ways, it's not just what I say, but it's the emotional resonance that carries the words. And that's why we don't like an email when someone's trying to convince us. We want to hear their voice because we get the music, we get the sound.
So, Caroline, I'm curious to understand, like, what's more important? Is it the structure of information that you deliver, or is it the tonality within which you deliver it? Because my sense is like we're like hardwired for stories. It's like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and we all know where that went. So, like, yeah, like we're kind of like hardwired for stories, and I think we have very finely tuned, let's just say, I don't know, I want to say like bullshit radars, like when it comes to like
Yeah.
this, because like you could you could have an amazing story, you could deliver it tonally correctly, but the way that you deliver it, meaning the structure of information, if it's not right, like people are like, like it's a reason why,
So much.
dude, like it's the reason why you hate one series but you love another. Like my wife and I
Mm.
just finished the Last Kingdom, also set in the UK, and like we couldn't like, but like we were binge watching this thing because the story, we were just so invested in the structure of the story and the characters and the ambiguity of like the decision making and who, and it was like unpredictable, so it was novel. And you know what I mean, like versus say something that
Mm.
was that's not structured the right way, where there's no depth to the story or the characters within it, and so you start to switch off. You're like, nah, I've got too many other things to too many other options, right? So
Yeah.
how important is the structure of story, and what's your advice to CEOs, startup founders, leaders, visionaries who need to get the story out into the world in a way that's going to resonate?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I'm absolutely with you that great communication is like a great film. You've got to have a great, the screenwriter is the god of any production, right? Because if you've got the words have to be right first, and then sort out the sound and the visuals and do the rehearsal and get the tech in place. So my advice really on this, and it goes back to something I was working with this group on today, is that it's so much about, as you say, framing and story. There's a fascinating man called Paul Zak, who you may have come across, you may even have interviewed. He's the vampire neuroeconomist. And the reason they call him that is he takes a lot of blood in his research, and he's fascinated by the neurochemistry of the dramatic arc. You know, when you watch a movie, like you said about The Last Kingdom, great TV series, why does it hook you? And his big thesis is that great stories, because he's tested, I mean, it's not just a thesis, he's tested it by taking lots of blood from his, his studies. And he says great stories spike cortisol first, the problem space, the adrenaline that focuses us, that makes us really want to pay attention because there's a problem we need to solve. And then when you get the release, when the character is transformed or they have an epiphany, that releases oxytocin, which is the hormone of connection. And when he spikes that sequence of hormones in his research, when it's about a cancer charity, a children's cancer charity, people give money to that charity when he tells a story with a very specific sequence. And so, what that means for founders, for business leaders, something we were working on today, use a structure that I learned from Donald Miller's story brand work, and I teach on a lot. So simple. First up, what's the grunt test? What is it that if a cave person were listening to your story would make them sit up and pay attention? How can this help me survive? So today, my group are talking about a transformation, but they're talking to a group of people who bill on recruitment of top leaders in tech businesses. And so, although this is about change, ultimately the grunt test is this is going to make us more successful as a business. And then you get to the pain place. What's the challenge? The challenge is the climate out there. The challenge is it's getting more difficult. So then you get to the vision. How is this transformation going to help us step up, make ourselves different from everyone else in the game? And then you get to the plan. This is what we're going to do. The three things that you will need to action this week, the three things that you need to action over the next 3 months. And that story brand structure is like a little mini movie. And if someone says to you, oh, Matt, could you tell us about the elevator pitch for this new business? You can just go grunt test, pain, vision, plan. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very lean structure.
Pain. How do you decide on? Can we maybe just walk through that a bit more? Because I'm curious. Like, what other formats does a grunt test take? You know what I mean? Like, so let's take, I don't know, it's something simple like storytelling. Everybody, like, I have a, so I'm a, let's just say I'm a founder of a startup. I've raised, $20 million. What is it? And I'm in, like, I don't know, let's just say the automation space for enterprise companies. As maybe a bad example, we can choose other ones. But what would I'm trying to make this tangible? So when you say a grunt test, what does this actually look like? In a real world.
So the answer is it depends. And the thing that is most important is to decide what's my intention here and who am I communicating to. So say you're going up in front of private equity, for example. Step into the shoes of the analysts, the partners, and think about what is it that they need from me here to know whether this business is something they want to invest in. And it's that moment that you decide the grunt test by really taking a moment to step out of your own body and step into the body of a partner of a private equity firm or the analyst that's just left Goldman Sachs to come and work for them. And think about what do they need to hear from me and my team and in what order. And what's the one thing that will get them to sit up and pay attention. So when I work with corporate leaders on board or exco stuff, it's often asking them, when this leadership group talk about what matters to them, what are the 5 phrases that they always use? Those phrases are going to form your grunt test. Because you're getting to someone's deep drivers, and the deep drivers when you're presenting a business might be different each time. Even a different investor, a group of investors may all have a different grunt test. Now, if you're presenting them all together, you've got to think of who it is particularly that you want to influence and what the common drivers might be. But if you're going up to different investors, work out their individual drivers and present those as the grunt test.
How much of a role does surprise take in that? I mean, because it's kind of like, is a grunt test a phrase or is it maybe a story? And I find like a lot, especially in the startup space, and we're going to get into like the pace of technology and things like that. But there's this idea of surprise, and I think oftentimes people love to talk about the solution and they don't set it up. And I think one of the most overlooked words in business is context. Like if you change the context, you change everything. If I'm pitching to a room full of investors and I want to be different, and probably just I want to be understood. And I think that's a really important jobs to be done when it comes to communication and you're pitching to an investor. So
much.
And I think what I've learned is to bake your personal story into it, in a story, right? Like that for me is a large part of the grunt test. So how much of it is surprise? How much of it is story based? How much of it is phrase based? I don't know. It's context dependent. To my point there, but like, what's your words of wisdom to start a founder looking to raise money? Like, here's how you start. Here's a good way to start, straight out of the gates.
So the odd example, and it's a slightly it may feel slightly left field. I learned how to do this when I was pitching my book to A-list actors, because I needed to get to A-list actors for my first book to interview them about confidence. And a fundraiser said to me, listen, if you want to get to Kate Blanchett or Helen Mirren or Ewan McGregor, go online and watch all their interviews, read their New York Times interviews, find out everything they say about what drives them. My camera's doing funny things again.
It is.
I'm not used to winter. A fundraiser said to me, if you want to get to A-list actors, go online and find out about everything that drives them. Watch their interviews, read the New York Times piece they did, and cook it down to about 5 or 6 values, phrases, keywords that they always use. And that gives you a sense of what someone is driven by. And then be creative. Go for a walk, go for a run, go for a swim, sit in the garden, look up at the sky, and think about, if I was this group of investors, how would I want Caroline to pitch her business? And it is a creative process, because what you're doing is you're getting beyond the, now I'm going to tell you about our business and we're going, it's so boring to do that. You might find that you start with a question. As you say, Matt, you might start with your story. But I think a good rule is always go in medias res, dive straight into the action like a good film. Don't do that awful warm up where you tell them what you're going to tell them, or you say thank you for having me, because it cuts people off. And I think that thing, as you say, about surprise them with energy, with verve, with creativity. I love a set of questions.
Mm.
That captures attention much more than today we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the key things is to take the investor and put them into your story. Like if you're in the sustainability space, like, and you know the investor has like 2 kids, you know, so the year is 2030, you know, your 2 children are, you know, here's the problem. You know what I mean? Like
I love that.
doing things creatively like that, as opposed to, hi, we, you know, we solved this sustaining problem, and it's, you know, it's worth $1 trillion, and you know, if we only get 1% of the $1 trillion market, like, you're going to be rich and we're going to be rich, and you know, it's like, duh, duh,
So
duh.
boring. They've heard
Yeah.
that 4 times already today. And the word that you used, Matt, which I love, is you. You is the power word. You will know, you will understand, you will have experienced that. That's what really lights up people's brains.
Mm. So maybe let's change gears for a bit. We spoke about the pace of technology, obviously working a lot with corporate leaders. So what are you seeing on the ground, like in terms of leadership, trying to manage the pace of technology developments and things like that? Like, what's going on from your perspective?
Today, being in this very fast-paced, high-energy, highly successful business, there was a really clear message that we were talking about as a group. And it's that they have to go, you know, if you're in the tech space, you have to go fast. There is no alternative. You know, your Slack is pinging at a pace that you probably need to keep up with. But there's a different gear when you get in front of an audience that you need to be able to change into. And it's a more human gear. In particular, it's a gear that allows you, whether you're on Zoom or in a room with people, in a huddle or in a big town hall, when we talk, what we say is as much about our pauses as it is about what we say. Because in your pauses as a speaker, what you're doing is paying attention to your audience. You're noticing how a message is landing. That would be true with a group of investors or with your team. And a good speaker is almost dancing with an audience. They land that origin story. They watch how the investors process it. And that then tells them where they go next. And it's like you're calibrating moment by moment as a good speaker. How is this working? When we're going at 180 miles an hour, you know, we just don't notice. So I know when people are in that fight or flight zone because they say to me, I just gabble. I go so fast. I can't seem to stop. I can't seem to pause. I don't notice what the audience are doing. And when I sit down, I can't remember what I said. If that's happening to you, that's fight or flight. And the thing that actors do to go from, oh, I can't do it, to a space of calm where they can be really present to an audience is they take a half. And a half is half an hour. And I talk a lot about this in Find Your Voice, which is the third book. It's half an hour where an actor is just really present to their body, their breath, what's in the room, music that they've got playing. They're not checking their phone. They're not rushing. They're not late. And what that means is that when they get in front of an audience, they can really be present to everything that happens in the room. And audiences notice that and they love it and they remember you.
Caroline, you mentioned you reached out to actors to interview them. Um, what was your pitch to them? Like, I'm curious to change the context of like you're on stage talking. I know a lot of founders do, but I would suggest that I would say over 90% of them are using email to reach out to investors, reach out to prospects. In America, just for more context, maybe we should just call it the context show. But in America, no one answers their phones. Like if I in South
No.
Africa, I've moved to the States like 3 months ago. So if I phone 10 CEOs in South Africa, like 8 of them will answer the phone. In America, if I phone 10 CEOs, like you'll be lucky if one does. And so the role of digital channels and digital acquisition and storytelling on digital and email and things like this is like, it's so important.
Huge.
And so again, it's changing the structure of story into an email. And I'm curious to, for our audience to learn from you. I mean, obviously actors I would say it's a difficult segment to get attention of, like they're in the attention business. And so I'm curious to understand what your process was in terms of the structure of what your story was, to interview these actors. And so what was that? And then number two, like, who did you get a response from?
It's so interesting. The first thing to say is this was 2008. So the gatekeepers had more power. There was less direct access. And I think it was a less noisy world. But I think the strategies are the same. My project was about helping people to speak with confidence. So when I researched each actor, I looked for what they talked about when they talked about confidence. And I made sure that the first 3 sentences of the email was absolutely framed. My project was always the same. It was about helping people to speak with confidence, but it was framed in their language. So each email was slightly different. And I also thought very carefully about the title of the email and made sure that I used some language that either their publicist or they, if I was in direct contact with them, had used in the past. I had such a good success rate. In the first week, Helen Mirren, Kate Winslet, and Kate Blanchett all said yes. And then, as any good founder knows, once you've got 3 big names to say, we've talked to Meta and Google and Amazon about this project, you know that you're going to get through the door of a couple of other places.
Yeah.
So that was the key.
So that's actually a very good point, right? It's kind of like the more referenceability you have, it's kind of like it gives you more credibility, and I think one of the things that's interesting to maybe double down on here is that so with startups, they're always trying to talk to they should, not always, they should be talking to customers to trying to figure out like what is the right product for them to build so that they can get to product market fit and then ultimately go and scale and become unicorns. That's the whole dream, right? And so when they are talking to customers, doing the actual interview or conducting the actual interview, in your case, you were trying to figure out what they know about like how to speak with confidence. If you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right answer. And many people are just not equipped. Like they don't have the skill to ask the right question, to get the right answer, to build the right product. And there's a book called The Mom Test where it's kind of like, no one's going to tell you suck to your face, like your mom's always going to tell you it's a great idea, Matt. You know what I mean? Bless her. My mom passed last year, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Well, it's not, but it's all good, if you know what I mean. And so, and even like I've been running customer discoveries recently, and, I was like, shit, I'm asking the right question here, and so what's your advice around like constructing questions? I mean, there's obviously yes, no's, like it's a different thing to an open-ended question. Yeah. And so when you were conducting these interviews with Dame Helen Mirren and Kate Winslet and all these guys, like what was your strategy around the questions you would ask so that you had the right insight to then translate into a book, Gravitas?
It was quite a dance, but there was a very straightforward strategy that I used because as well as being a voice person, I'm also an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I did a lot of that and I still use it all the time. And when I was asking questions, I was doing a lot of rapport building and matching language patterns. So if someone said, well, if we go two steps back, the first thing I would do is listen to interviews, as we've said, so that I had a real sense of what I wanted them to talk about. Now, in the product space, that may not be feasible, but you might know where you need to guide someone to. You might know the area that you need them to talk about. And then it's about taking their language and turning it into a question. So Matt, if I say, what's your favorite place in the US? You've been here a few months. What's your favorite place in the US?
Denver, baby.
What is it that you love about Denver?
The mountains.
Tell me about the mountains. Where do you like to go?
Well, anywhere. They're beautiful. Breckenridge. I can't wait for it to snow. Outdoors, nature, stuff like that.
So when it snows, what will you be doing?
Hopefully snowboarding.
So you can see how it works. I'm following the thread of your interest.
Mm.
And if you keep using open questions and keep following the thread of someone's interest, you end up getting down to a bedrock value. And they'll go, well, just because I love it. I love the snow. I love winter sports, And then you ask another question. But when I'm probing or interviewing, I'm always, and I do this with clients all the time, as a coach and also as a pitcher, follow the thread of what drives someone, and you'll really get to know what matters to them. And when we know what matters to someone, we can sell them things for the good reason that we know what's going to work.
Mm.
And it's not a sale in inverted commas. It's giving someone something that they need because they've told you what they need.
Yeah, I love that. So I think oftentimes we're listening to respond, not listening to understand. And even like when I conduct these interviews, like I don't really know where I'm going to go. I just let the conversation, like kind of what we've done today, right? So far is to it's the idea of layering. So if you and I also trained as an NLP practitioner when I was in London. I was very young then. It was like 17 years ago. I don't apply it, but I understand. I think it's for me the value of neurolinguistic programming was to understand how people think, less about like how to create like a you have a phobia to X and you must change. Like if you change the context into if you get into the business world, like, and you start mirroring and matching, people are like, what the fuck is this guy doing? So like, it's shit. Like you got to be a real pro to do it right. And it takes years. So, anyway, it is what it is. But this idea of in NLP is also around peeling away the layer of the onion, right? To understand beliefs and values and things like this. So what I've done strategically to get to an insight is to work with, is to keep asking why. Like, Matt, why do the mountains matter to you? Oh no, they matter to me because it's pretty and I love being outdoors and what have you. But why does that matter? Well, I've got 2 young kids. Okay, so why do 2 young kids matter to you? Well, like now you've got me, right? But if you yeah, because it's like, well, come on, dude, like it's the truth. Like, I love bedrock, my kids. Yeah, but it's like, now you've got me. So, Matt, what would it mean to you if I could help you get access to the mountains more often to spend more time with your kids? Now you've really got me. How much does it cost? I don't know. It's a lot of money. I'm prepared to drop it all because it's
anything.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Versus like, well, I could sell you like a nice little mountain bike trip. It's like, no, dude. Like, you have to understand why people buy things.
The deep drivers that drive people. And so when I was interviewing actors, it was just following the thread to those really deep values. And it's amazing how universal they are. But I absolutely agree that NLP for me and its value was this state of curiosity and that lovely frame, Korzybski's frame, the map is not the territory. The idea that in a world where we're constantly bombarded with sensory information, we have to have our own map. We have to filter out information. So if you say to me, London, I have a specific map of the important places to go. If I asked you what your map of London looks like, it would be totally different. And when we understand that our maps are unique to us, we start to listen with much more curiosity. And rather than being, I know, we're in that space that you're talking about where you just dig. And that is the powerful space for pitching. Mm-hmm. When I teach people to pitch, it's always that it's not about just presenting yourself. It's about asking great questions. People forget that.
And I think I love what you said about being curious. Like people always say to me, like, why do I do this show? And I'm like, well, there's a number of reasons. One is because I actually care deeply about this founder journey and the suffering of entrepreneurs and stuff, and helping them with conversations like this so that they can win whatever winning means to them. But I think like being curious is a very important principle, isn't it? Because if you are trying to build a product, there's one entrepreneur that's just so high on his own supply around what he thinks the best solution should be, and won't talk to customers, won't be curious about what the best solution is for them, will just want to go there because that's what he thinks is right. He believes that he or she believes her intuition is more powerful than the customer's point of view. You know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yeah,
there's a disconnect there. And so being open to, and I suppose this is what you did with talking to these celebrities also, was around being curious, right? Like, so like you weren't married to an idea about what would go into the book. You didn't know. You were open, and please correct me if I'm off piste here, but to use another mountain snow analogy context. But like you were open to what the best solutions and ideas could be so that people can actually speak with confidence. And I would also go so far as to say that the reason why your book has done so incredibly well and you built a sort of like a mini empire off the back of your success with the book is because you were open to what the best solution was. You weren't married to a preconceived idea. Is that correct?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that since I wrote that first book, it's become even more important. And I think there's lots of neuroscience out there at the moment that says people who are good at dealing with uncertainty, welcome to our current time, are curious, they're present and they're open, and they're able to kind of turn off as much as possible the predictive brain's desire to fix things and to be right, and they're able to sit with uncertainty. And I think for founders, that's the secret sauce, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes us, as you say, flexible.
Well, the thing also, I love what you said there around sitting with uncertainty, because for me, what I wrote this book called Your Inner Game, did very well. I wrote about, it was basically like 12 principles for high impact entrepreneurs. And I was talking about uncertainty and how, like, there's the only certainty is uncertainty when you're a business owner and you're a visionary trying to change the world. So you have to learn to sit with it. The only problem is it sucks. Like,
Yeah, really.
it really fucking sucks, dude. And like we're sitting with it, and like we all human, right? We all have fear, we all have doubt, we all have insecurities, we all have moments where we don't believe in ourselves, that this isn't gonna work, and I can't raise money, and I've had 300 no's, and like, are you really prepared to take another no? And like all I know to be true about super successful founders, like the CEO of Peloton got rejected 300 times, Airbnb, like all the emails from like well-established venture capital firms, that said no to them, like they persevered, right? That was another one of the principles. So but the leverage comes from having the capability and the power to sit with uncertainty and to say, I'm prepared to suffer without evidence that this is going to work. You know what I mean? Like that takes a certain type of mindset to do. Like it's not easy. Like I always say, like anyone can be an entrepreneur, but I can tell you for a fact it's not for you or for a lot of people out there, because it's too hectic. It's too much. It's too much uncertainty, and like we need certainty. Like Tony Robbins even says, like I need to be. There's 4 needs of the personality, isn't there? Like certainty, uncertainty. Like we need the certainty of certainty, but we don't want to be bored. So we need uncertainty. We need surprise. We need novelty, and we need significance and things like this. Anyway, my question though is like, what's your advice to a founder about sitting with uncertainty? Like you do it, I've done it, but I'm curious to get your view.
I trained as an actor, and acting is a fundamentally uncertain profession. And I think the tool that actors are given is to get into the body. And some founders will almost instinctively be doing this. We can either, I was taught this by a neuroscientist, the body's and brain's attention system is really limited. I can either be in my head psyching myself out, okay, it's the 307th no, this is never going to happen, we've burned through all our capital, I'm going to be a failure, all of that stuff. We can do that in our heads, or we can switch that off by coming back to, I'm breathing. I can feel the shirt on my skin. I can feel the air on my face. I can see the cars driving around Clapham Common. And that brings me back to a sensory place where that inner chatter quietens down. And it's not the truth. It's just the story that we tell ourselves. And so for any founder, any entrepreneur, any business leader who's getting stuck, just go out, move, get into your body, go for a walk, swim, sit quietly and breathe for 3 minutes. I interviewed a major general for Gravitas who had been part of the Iraq war, and it was in Basra, which was not good for the British Army. And he said, every morning I just used to go for a run. And no matter what was happening, I ran around the green zone and it cleared my head. And I think that for a founder, it sounds simple, but we don't do it when we're locked up. And as soon as we move, it frees up our thinking, our creativity, and our sense of handling uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a great point. Even recently, my sister, I was telling you, she lives out in Winchester in the UK, and she came to visit me, and it was like we're just like moving house sucks, but changing countries is a whole other animal. And I was just having like I was sitting here like literally on this desk next to me, and I was just like feeling super overwhelmed. Like I was like, I was gonna kill myself. I was like beating myself up and having one of those really down days. And it's interesting, right? Like, it's always like as a culture, it's kind of like, well, you're a man, you must man up, and it's like, well, why don't you just have a man down day? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I love that. Go her. Yeah.
you should have like you should just like fuck it. Like, I'm not gonna be able to work at 100% today or 110. Like, I'm done. Like, my energy is down. Like, whatever. So, but the challenge though is knowing when, like, to walk away,
so much,
and to know, and like, and also to have like coping mechanisms, right? To say, cool, well, you're suffering. Today is not your day. Walk away. Step away, like close the laptop and go for a walk, go to the mountains, like do something for you. And I love what you're saying, like get into your body, because it's almost like go for a walking meditation.
Yep.
You know, like I did that with my baby girl, Ray. Like last week, I was like, screw it. It's 3 o'clock, close the laptop. And I just went for a walk. And I came back, I felt just totally revived, re-energized. I had new perspective. You know, thoughts come to you when you're not working oftentimes.
And there's loads of great science on this, isn't there? That if we want the creative brain to kick in, get out of work. You know, so work is a strange concept, and sometimes, as you say, the big ideas come when we kind of let ourselves play. And there's so much neuroscience to back that up about how the brain processes.
Yeah, isn't that thing like where you have the best ideas come when you're in the shower or something?
Exactly.
You know?
That space not to have to pressure ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an important trick, and it's like the idea of like working in your business and working on it. And I think the working on doesn't mean you actually working on it. You know what I mean? Like working.
Yeah, you might be running.
Yeah, exactly. Go work on yourself. That's also working on your business, because you are your business, especially when you're a startup, in many cases. But Caroline, it's been great chatting to you. Just one more question, and then I'll let you go. You obviously like super successful. You've written multiple books. You got another book in the winds. Why do you do what you do? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
I had a job that I hated, and there was a moment where I got into this work that I do with voice, helping people find their voices, helping people take their anxiety, their adrenaline, and turn it into presence and power and authority. And it just, I found a job that I love more than anything else. It's a bedrock value for me. The feeling of watching an entrepreneur or a leader suddenly find their voice, communicate, land a message, win business, win a pitch, get investment. That is just the best feeling ever. And it's so easy for people to do that. And so it's one of those things that work is more fun than fun for me. If I won the lottery, I would still do it. And I was lucky to find it because I know what it's like to have a job that doesn't feel like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I love doing what I do. I look forward to like, what's in my day tomorrow? And then I'm like, oh, cool, I'm doing 3 interviews, right? Because it's time well spent, you know. And today was time well spent with you. I feel like we should get you back and talk about some other stuff, because I think like there are lots of little rabbit holes I wanted to go down to, but just purely from a lack of time perspective today. So, but anyway, Caroline, look, it's been a privilege having you here. Thank you for being on the show.
My total pleasure, Matt, and I'd love to come back and talk more.
Anytime. Thanks, everybody. Ciao, ciao.